Marmot. Everybody likes Endangered Mongolian. For those who raise their hands, it's kind of they really help their lives. So now it's a very interesting presentation about how to recovering endangered Mongolian marmot. Very nice.
Hello, hi everyone, my name is Reilly. I was a former Fulbright scholar to Mongolia, and this fall I will be starting as an MS candidate at the University of Maryland, their Department of Anthropology. I received my bachelor's from the University of Vermont, during which I completed this thesis study, the focus of which was on Mongolian marmot decline and recovery in the Gobi Steppe. So just to give a brief overview of my presentation for today, I'm going to cover some of the main environmental threats in Mongolia currently. Then I'm going to talk about the Sustainable Kashmir project under which this project was conducted, give a little background on marmot ecology, significance, and declines, and then talk about our survey efforts and the results of those surveys, and then go with some conclusions and takeaways from our study. That was also a little picture of Yubi, the Ulaanbaatar, from my apartment during my Fulbright. I also just wanted to point out some of the key points I hope you guys take away from my presentation today. Firstly, is that Mongolian marmots have experienced unprecedented declines currently. Their extinction risk is very high at this stage, and in order to save the species, intervention is required at this point. I also hope that you take away from this presentation that community involvement in these recovery efforts and in conservation efforts in general in Mongolia is really essential. Without community buy-in and support of conservation strategies, they will not be successful and will not be successful for the long term. So firstly, some environmental threats in Mongolia currently. So rapid development during the transition, since 1991, transitioning to a free market economy, the country's seen rapid development across many sectors, the largest of which is mining, and mining poses significant threats to the environment currently. Climate change, additionally, the effects are significant today. Central Asia has already experienced 2-degree temperature increases on average. This has led to increasing drought and desertification in Mongolia, as I'm sure many of you are aware. And sadly, more and more herders every year have to abandon their livelihoods and move to the cities due to the difficulties of climate change. Additionally, lack of environmental protection. So Mongolia has pledged. Can everyone hear me? Okay. Hear me? Okay. Thank you. Additionally, Mongolia has pledged to conserve 30% of its land area by 2030. However, typically local governments lack funds to enforce these protections, and so often it's difficult to protect these areas. And lastly, also since the transition to a free market economy, herd sizes in the countryside continue to increase substantially, and this has led to a majority of Mongolia's lands being overgrazed and continued degradation of the rangelands today. Of course, a picture I took in Dornagoldi and during my research. So next, I also wanted to talk a little bit about Iknart Nature Reserve, the study area where my study took place, as well as my Fulbright, the image of a ger at our research site. It's a little dark, you can see there. But here, so Iknart is located in Dornagoldi, between Dalanjagalang and Adag, so it's northern Dornagoldi. Choyer, it's just a bit further north if you know it. Iknart was established in 1996. It was established to protect a population of Argali sheep, and it is a multi-use reserve, so herders live in the park and raise their livestock there as well. A big commitment that Iknart Nature Reserve made that has made it successful is a commitment to community engagement within the park and really bringing the local herding community into their conservation efforts. So this has been done through a vulture ambassador program where herders are paired up to help with monitoring of a threatened vulture in the park, as well as Argali and ibex captures that take place every fall. So here are some images. every fall, we have teams of rangers and herders come out, and we set up these huge nets, about 1 kilometer long. And the herders and rangers help us out by going and tracking down these argali and ibex, as well as the black-tailed gazelle, and go out and drive these animals into the net. And that allows us to assess the health of the animals, as well as attach radio collars here on the argali. That allows us to track the animals and understand their movement and how they're using the park better. This technique is not used anywhere else in the world, only here in Iknar because of the herders and the skill that they have. Mongolia to go and herd out these wild animals. It was very exciting, very fun to watch. There's a photo of them after successfully catching an argali. The herders and rangers were talking about what went well, what didn't go well. And additionally, the rangers who help protect Iknar are also herders who are a part of the community and have likely lived in Iknar for all of their lives. And so this effort creates like a direct connection between the herding community and the wildlife that lives in the park. That helps create like a sense of community among the Iknar community and a sense of pride in protecting those argali and ibex and gazelles. And so that has actually led to increased protections for those species and healthy populations of argali and ibex in Iknar when they are threatened in other parts of Mongolia. Additionally, the park is committed to training Mongolian biology students as well. On the left there, we have students helping with small mammal surveys. On the right, they're not studying, they're playing cards, but this is after the argali captures. These are all biology students, mostly from UB, who came down and helped with the argali and ibex capture. And this investment into the next generation of Mongolians ensures that these biological studies will continue for the long term. So next, this study was carried out under the Sustainable Kashmir Project, which was a coalition of the Iknar Nature Reserve, Gund Institute for Environment, Denver Zoological Society, and the Mongolian Conservation Coalition. We aimed to use a participatory, community-based approach to develop a strategy for grazing reform. So this project started with a stakeholder workshop with the local community in Iknar. And this included local community members, community leaders, local government officials, and others. Here is Suk Amgalambatin. He is the director of the Argali Research Center. With a community member here, after we had identified key values among the community, identified different management strategies people were open to, and then determined which of those management strategies best met those sets of values among the community. And one of the top findings from this workshop was that Mongolian marmots are one of the top species of concern among the Iknar community. So that leads us to Mongolian marmots. So they are historically common and widespread in steppe environments, though they have experienced substantial declines in recent decades. This is a concern because they have significant ecological, economic, and cultural relevance in Mongolia. So for a little background on their ecology, they are ecosystem engineers. So this means that they have a significant impact on their surrounding environment. As I'm sure many of you know, they dig extensive burrow systems that can have upwards of 90 openings. And in digging these burrow systems, they can influence soils and nutrient cycling, hydrology, as well as plant species richness. They also help provide shelter for species in open steppe environments where shelter is not easily found by other species. So red foxes, Corsic foxes, and lizards will use these burrows as well for cover. They also serve as a prey source for carnivores and raptors in the system. Sorry. Okay. So they have this ecological significance, even considered to be a keystone species because of the effect they have on other species in the environment. And they also have an economic relevance as they are traded for their fur and body parts, which are in demand in Chinese markets. They are also considered to be a Mongolian delicacy, correct? I think people very much like to eat them. I always hear that they're delicious. So actually, this you can't see the photo too well back here, but this is Hostai. This picture here is Hostai National Park, which is where I first saw the marmots. So who has seen marmots? What about eat? Eat no. It's no. I have not. But everyone says they're delicious. Going with that, right? But so because of this, they have this cultural relevance to Mongolians, right? And they're also an iconic steppe species too. So despite the significance, they have significantly declined, mostly due to overharvesting for these body parts, their fur, and also for food. They have been very much overhunted. It's possible that they also declined due to overgrazing and changes to the rangelands that have also created habitat changes, as they're probably sensitive to disturbance. But just to give some estimates as well, there were approximately 40 million individuals in 1940, and there were estimated to be less than 5 million in 2001. So that's a loss of 35 million individuals in just 60 years. Because of these declines, this has prompted small-scale reintroduction efforts of marmots, the first of which was attempted by the Mongolian Academy of Sciences in 2016. More recently, the Ignat Park Administration partnered with Hostai National Park in 2021 and translocated 50 marmots, from Hostai to Ignat Nature Reserve. So far, half of those individuals have survived, and we'll have to continue to monitor to see how successful that was. More reintroduction efforts are planned. However, there's still uncertainty around the biological requirements of the species, and careful planning is required to maximize the success of those efforts and make sure those initial threats are reduced. That leads us then to the objectives of this study, which were to resurvey historically active colonies to assess the extent of marmot decline within Ignat. And then we also aim to develop a model of distribution, or marmot occupancy, as a function of environmental conditions. So as I said, our study area was Ignat Nature Reserve, which is located in East Kobra Province, Dornoloby. It is at the transition of grassland, steppe, and semi-desert. This here is the northern part of Ignat, and you can see the roads are mapped out, as well as the little red dots are gears in the park as well. And Ignat contains a range of habitats, including open plains, tall grasslands, shrublands, and rocky outcrops. So for our survey efforts, we surveyed 143 sites twice in June and August of 2019. There were a total of 81 colonies that were identified as active in 2010 through transects and interviews with local herders to identify those locations. Those are here on the right, so the little blue bubbles. Those are the colonies that were active in 2010. On the left, those are our random colonies we generated for comparison of the environmental conditions and to see if new marmot colonies had sprouted up at all. And we were resurveying for signs of activity of marmots. So we also developed an occupancy model using a logistic regression framework and a model selection approach. Here's me and my friend Bonnie, who's our driver in the countryside in Ignat. So our covariates included habitat proportions, human factors, and physical environment elements. So we ended up developing these colonies by using a 73-meter buffer, which was the home range estimates of marmots. And we had 71 total colonies within the study area, and then 61 random sites for this technique. Just a closer look at that model set, our hypothesis was that marmot colony occupancy is a function of environmental conditions. So we looked at all these different factors, the different habitat types, some physical environment characteristics, and also human influences of roads and gears. So essentially the goal of this was to see which factor was the best predictor for if a marmot colony was present or not present. So for example, if a colony was 100% rocky, was that a good predictor of a marmot colony being there or not? Or was it a human factor? That was the best predictor. So the results of our survey, out of the 81 colonies that were active in 2010, only 3 showed signs of marmot activity in 2018. So this represents a 96% decline in just 9 years. There was no marmot activity at any of the random sites. For our model results, you can see there the top listed model had strong empirical support, and that was roads and shrubs. So for a closer look at that model here, it indicated that roads had a negative effect on occupancy, while shrubs had a positive effect. So that essentially tells us that roads, a human factor, was the best predictor of marmot presence, and it had a negative effect. So from this, we can conclude that roads are in fact implicated in marmot declines. This has broad relevance for countryside development. There are currently very few studies on the effects of roads in Mongolia, but these findings tell us that even dirt track, low traffic roads that we commonly see in the countryside have real and unexpected impacts on species. Currently, the surveys that we did also tell us that Mongolian marmots have experienced unprecedented declines, and that their risk of extinction is high and requires intervention at this stage. Any plans for road expansions or continued development in the countryside must assess the unintended impacts of roads, and further studies must assess the role of roads in poaching and endangered species declines in Mongolia. Lastly, community-based conservation is essential, as I mentioned, especially with this finding that roads, a human factor, was the driving force of decline for those marmots. Any attempt to reintroduce marmots will require community buy-in and support of those conservation efforts, and not only support, but likely collaboration and additional protections for those marmots if the marmots stand a chance of surviving. Thank you all so much. We'd like to acknowledge these groups and these individuals.
Questions?
I don't have a question. I think that the many reasons I do a lot of it. One of the main reasons I think is the health and disease.
Among marmots.
This is the one. I've grown up in the sheep farm. I know it's when that was everywhere, but it's when the disease comes, when something happens, everything. And then it gradually came back. But this is the main thing. I think we commonly eat something, but there's a big differences. But this that disease is the more important. You want to preserve this population, well, then you have to follow some kind of cancer. So you have some kind of that healthy and they keep them in a certain area so that they can't. I don't know. I'm not the biologist, but I know that's the one.
Could be right. Yeah, honestly, I'm not that familiar on the disease transmission risk and what diseases have led to their declines. But that definitely is a fair point out with these very small, isolated populations you have. They're even more susceptible to any disease coming in and are dealing with a lack of genetic diversity, right? Because it's a small population, so that makes them even more vulnerable to disease risk. So it's definitely, a huge issue and must be consideration for future reintroductions.
I have a question.
Okay.
What is your definition of a road?
Right.
Two roads, and it's mostly tracks everywhere.
Yeah, true.
So how do you, when you think about roads as an influence, maybe influence You can drive wherever I want to.
Right.
So I wonder how to
Mhm.
control that.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. I would assume, you know, for this, for the purpose of this analysis, I would assume it's more within IGNAR. There's like more developed roads that are for cars and right, so it's like a 2-lane road. And then I know that there's a ton of dirt roads that are more just motorcycles, right? That are just kind of smooth motion anywhere. So this is probably more of what we were looking at as well. There's more well-established dirt roads. Yeah, exactly. But of course, even the motorcycle tracks and the small tracks through the sharps, through the stuck would also be concerned. So that's why even more so like the community buy-in and awareness, personal like awareness of the importance of protecting environments, the awareness of any effort that's implemented, and then an agreement to kind of be a part of that conservation and help protect that group that we serve, that new population that's created or something, is really essential because those roads are hard to and for any enforcement.
Two questions. The first one is, so what is colony? What do you mean by colony? And the second question is, so what happens if marmot extinct? So what kind of background then policy?
Sure. Yeah, so your first question, great question of how we define a colony. So at first, what we did was we went around and marked any burrow opening, any entrance to a burrow. And then what we did was actually we mapped all of those openings, and we used GIS, just like a mapping tool. We used a home range estimate that was created in Pusztai National Park. They estimated the average distances that marmots tend to travel, like around their burrow openings. We used that estimate of 73 meters and buffered out from each of those openings. Then any opening that overlapped in those bubbles was a colony. So we had 3. We buffered 73 meters, and if they were all within that, that was a colony. One way over here, that was a different colony. But that was a tricky question we had to think about, to understand.
So maybe one goal. How many times?
It varies, because yeah, as I said, they can have over 90 burrow openings sometimes, or we saw some that were as small as 7 openings or 3 openings, so it varies. For like a viable long-term population, it probably has to be like 7 openings might not survive. That might not be population in the future.
Can they be domesticated as pets?
I don't know the answer to that question.
I think about it.
I'm gonna say, they'd probably say no. Right, exactly.
Not the comment.
I also realized, go back to answer your second question. Yeah, the impact to the environment is, it's worrisome because they are so, influential over the other, animals in the species, right, or in the environment. I mean, foxes, lizards, even birds have been seen like nesting in their colonies as well. And they also will affect soil health as well too, because that's super important, that aeration of the soil, that, it's slowly becoming certified, but like in the steppe, that's really heavy, like packed down earth. And the marmots are very important for stimulating that. So we don't fully know exactly how these environments will continue to change, but it's probably not great. It's probably not going to be a great outcome for the other species in the environment that really depend on that cover, depend on that food source.
If one last says,
Have you heard anything about marmot meat being medicine for people? Because I learned that from my teacher.
Yeah, I do remember a friend talking to me about that actually, and mentioning that. I don't know very much about it honestly, and I would like to look into that more too. That's the thing with the using the whole community-based approach. I had originally sought to go back to Mongolia and delve more into like the social factors around people's relationship with marmots and how they value them and how they use them to better develop a recovery strategy. But that's an excellent point too that should be looked into more and understood. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you all so much. Thank you.
I made that. Thank you very much. So.